My name is Corporal Faye Hollis. I am 38 years old. I have been a military archivist for 11 years, and on a Tuesday morning in February, I was cataloguing a collection of personal correspondence donated to the archive by the estate of a Falklands veteran when I found a letter addressed to my grandmother. Her name was on the envelope, Margaret Hollis, written in a hand I did not recognize. The envelope had never been opened. The stamp had never been postmarked. It had never been sent. I set it down on the cataloguing table. I looked at it for a long time. I have handled thousands of letters in 11 years of this work, letters from every campaign the British military has been part of since records began to be kept carefully. Letters from men who came home and men who did not. Letters written in the knowledge that they might be the last thing a person ever said, and letters written in the ordinary rhythm of a posting, news from home requested, news of daily life offered, the particular texture of a life lived away from the people who mattered most. I had never found one addressed to someone I knew. I set it down. I did not open it immediately. I went to find Major Tess Dene.
Major Tess Dene ran the archive. She had been in the post for 6 years, and she had the particular quality of someone who understands that archival work is not merely administrative, that the papers in these boxes belonged to real people and carry real weight. She was the right person to ask. I told her what I had found: the name on the envelope, my grandmother, the unopened stamp. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said the archive's position was clear. Correspondence found in donated personal papers belongs to the archive as part of the collection, but the decision about whether to open a sealed letter addressed to a named living individual requires careful consideration, and in the case of a named deceased individual, the next of kin has a reasonable claim to be consulted. She said, "Your grandmother is deceased." I said, "She died in 2018. She said, "Then you are the appropriate person to decide whether to open it. Take the time you need." She said it with the particular care of someone who understands that the archive's procedural answer and the human answer are not always the same thing, and that both need to be attended to. I went back to the cataloging table. I sat down. I opened the letter.
The letter. 3 pages, written on ship's stationery, the kind issued to servicemen on troop ships for personal correspondence. The date? April 1982, 3 weeks before the landings at San Carlos. The handwriting was clear and careful, the kind of handwriting that had been taught rather than developed, a generation's particular cursive, pressed firmly. He had written, "Dear Margaret." He had written her name, and then he had paused. I could see the pause in the slight thickening of ink where the pen had rested, and then he had continued. I will not read you every word of it. Some of it is hers. The shape of it. Edmund Carr had been treated at the Queen Elizabeth Military Hospital in Woolwich in the winter of 1981, a training injury, a broken ankle that had required surgery and 6 weeks of recovery. My grandmother Margaret had been a nursing sister on the orthopedic ward at the time. She had cared for him during the recovery. He had written about those 6 weeks the way people write about things that mattered more than they expected to, the particular quality of a hospital ward in winter, the way the days had shaped themselves around the routines of treatment and rest, the conversations they had had, about his home in Yorkshire, about her family, about nothing important and everything important in the way that conversations become when one person is healing and another is helping them do it. He had written, "I understood entirely that you were married and that nothing in my thoughts or conduct could be permitted to complicate that. I want you to know that I understood it and that I respected it and that I respected you." He had written, "I am writing this because we are 3 days from the islands, and I have been thinking about what matters and what I might not have another opportunity to say, not to ask for anything, not to change anything, only to tell you that you were kind to me when I needed it and that I thought about that kindness as something worth naming before I go. 3 pages. April 1982. A stamp that had never been postmarked. He had written it, and he had not sent it. The object, at the center of everything, was the envelope. My grandmother's name on the front, in a hand I had not known, from a man I had never heard of. Margaret Hollis had been a nursing sister for 22 years. She had worked at 3 military hospitals across her career. She had cared for hundreds of patients. She had come home from every shift and cooked dinner and listened to my grandfather's day and raised my mother and been, as far as I had known her, entirely and completely herself, warm and precise, and not given to sentiment, which is different from not feeling it. I had not known about Edmund Carr. I had not known about the winter of 1981 and the orthopedic ward and the 6 weeks and the conversations. She had not told me. She had not told anyone, as far as I knew, because there was nothing to tell in the ordinary sense. A patient she had cared for, a man who had respected the boundaries of the situation entirely, a letter he had written and never sent. There was nothing to tell. And yet, I was sitting with 3 pages that said something true about my grandmother that I had not known, that she had been the kind of person who made a frightened soldier feel in the weeks before the Falklands that his recovery had been tended to by someone who saw him. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot.
I want to pause here, because sitting at a cataloging table in a military archive on a Tuesday morning, holding an unopened letter addressed to my dead grandmother, written by a man she had cared for 43 years ago, is not something 11 years of archival work had prepared me for. I had been assigned to this collection because of my regional expertise and my specialization in Falklands-era correspondence. I had been assigned to it professionally and competently, and I had found something inside it that had nothing to do with professional competence and everything to do with family. If you have ever found something in someone else's history that turned out to be yours, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now, because what I found out about Edmund Carr and what I decided to do with the letter is the part that surprised me most about this Tuesday.
Edmund Carr. I researched him through the archive's records that afternoon. He had served in the Falklands. He had come home. He had left the army in 1987 and had returned to Yorkshire. He had worked in agricultural machinery for 20 years. He had been married, a woman named Jean, who had predeceased him. He had 2 children. He had died in 2015 at the age of 67. His son, Philip Carr, had donated his papers to the archive in 2016. The donation had been processed by a colleague of mine, a routine receipt of a veteran's personal correspondence. No one handling the donation had any reason to. The letter had sat in the collection for 9 years, until Tuesday. I found Philip Carr through the archive's donor contact records. I wrote him a brief letter, formal, careful, explaining that in cataloging his father's papers, I had found correspondence that I believed had personal significance to the family of a named individual, and asking whether he would be willing to speak with me. He replied within a week. He said he had not known the letter existed.
The conversation with Philip Carr. We spoke on the phone on a Thursday evening. He was in his early 40s, younger than I had expected, which meant Edmund had been young when Philip was born. I told him what I had found and what it contained, not the full text. That felt like more than a phone call could hold, but the substance. His father, my grandmother, the orthopedic ward, the winter of 1981, the letter written on the troop ship in April 1982. Philip was quiet for a long time. Then he said his father had never spoken of a Margaret. He had never mentioned the Woolwich Hospital beyond the standard account of the injury and the recovery. He said, "Do you think she knew he had feelings for her?" I said, "The letter suggests he was careful not to show it. He describes respecting the situation entirely." Philip said, "He was like that, very correct, very contained about what he felt. He said it with the particular knowledge of a son who has spent a lifetime understanding his father through what was not said. He said, 'What will you do with the letter?' I said, 'That depends on what you want. It came with his papers. His estate donated it, but it was addressed to my grandmother, so I feel that question belongs to both of us.' He thought for a moment. Then he said, 'Keep it. It belongs with her family.' That's what he would have wanted, I think. He kept it because he couldn't send it, but if he'd known it would end up with someone who loved her, I think he'd have been glad."
My grandmother, Margaret Hollis, died in October 2018. She was 68 years old. She had been a nursing sister, then a district nurse, then retired, then a grandmother in the fullest sense. Present at everything, interested in everything, the kind of person who remembered the details of your life back to you when you had half forgotten them yourself. My grandfather, Robert, had died in 2009. Their marriage had been long and steady and ordinary in the way that long and steady marriages become ordinary, not diminished by it, but woven into the fabric of daily life so completely that the fabric and the marriage become indistinguishable. I had loved her. I had known her well. I had thought, in the particular way we think about the people we are close to, that I had a fairly complete picture of who she was. I had not known about the winter of 1981. I had not known that she had been the kind of person who made a frightened soldier feel seen in the weeks before the Falklands. I knew it now, and knowing it did not change who she had been. It added to it. The way that finding out something true about a person you loved always adds rather than subtracts, the picture becoming more complete, more real, more hers.
What I did with the letter. I kept it. Not in the archive. Philip was clear that it belonged with her family. I processed the cataloging entry for the collection, noting that one item of personal correspondence had been returned to the family of the addressee, as permitted under the archive's protocols for named individual correspondence. The letter is at home now, in a box that also contains my grandmother's nursing badge, a photograph of her from her 20s in uniform, and a birthday card she wrote me when I turned 30 that I have never been able to throw away. It belongs with those things. It is the last thing anyone who loved her ever said to her, even though she never heard it.
Here is what a Tuesday morning and an unopened envelope taught me. We do not know the full picture of the people we love. We know the version they lived in front of us. We know the stories they chose to tell and the ones they kept, and the ones they simply never found the occasion to share. We know the person as they were to us, which is real and complete in its own way, and also not the whole thing. My grandmother was a nursing sister who cared for a frightened soldier in the winter of 1981 and made enough of an impression on him that he wrote her a letter on a troop ship heading south and then could not send it and kept it for the rest of his life. I did not know that. I know it now, and it makes her more herself, not less. Hold the letters, even the unsent ones. They are the truest record of what people carried. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She found the letter on a Tuesday morning. She read what had never been delivered. She made sure it found its way home.